Hey guys, so today I kind of want to talk a little bit about Rhaegar and where he stands in the current meta, as well as what you guys could do about that. So for me, Rhaegar's kind of always been in an interesting spot because he shifts a lot with the meta as far as win rate goes, but he's never really that popular in the competitive environment. With a lot of the other heroes, healers anyways, getting buffs and reworks and adjustments, his popularity's dropped quite a bit, and the popularity of these other heroes have kind of increased, as well as his win rate has dropped a little bit. So I wanted to kind of talk about my thoughts on Rhaegar and what I kind of think should be done with Rhaegar, as well as if you guys should still be playing Rhaegar. So to me, I think Rhaegar is still a pretty strong hero. And I apologize, just gonna turn down the sounds just a tad bit more. I think Rhaegar's a pretty strong hero. He has a really commendable amount of stats, especially in the early game, that allows him to play a lot more aggressive than a lot of other heroes get to play. And also, he still is the only healer that can do cams in a reasonable amount of time. There's some healers that can do cams reasonably quick, but then they take a lot of damage or use a lot of mana. A good example is like Alex Strauss that could potentially do cams pretty quick, but takes a lot of resources, potentially a lot of health. She can do siege cams okay. Bruiser cams, she'll probably just die. And so Rhaegar kind of fits a unique space in that he can do almost any camp without too much of an issue. So, for example, right here, I decide to cover one more wave of soak, and then I head up and I help my team with the rest of those. But he's interesting. You can do bruiser camps, and this is part of the reason why I picked him on this map. It's the map with the most camps on each side, and I wasn't sure if my team was going to do camps, so I picked Rhaegar so that I could do those camps. But does he bring more to the table than just camps? Well, Cleanse is being slowly removed from a lot of healers, and there's fewer numbers of healers that have just a pure unstoppable cleanse. What I mean by that is Malfurion has a cleanse, but his cleanse is only a removal of CC that you already have on you, and it doesn't remove every CC. Where cleanse that Rhaegar has will make you unstoppable to any CC that might hit you, so that could prevent a hook potentially. And it also removes any form of CC that's on you, with the exception of like stasis. And so Cleanse itself as a talent is very, very good and much better than these kind of pseudo cleanses that other heroes have. Even Anduin has an unstoppable, but it doesn't last a full second, and it forces you to pull your allies away, which means if someone was diving in and doesn't want to be stopped, you can't just use your unstoppable on them. Or if an ETC goes out and moshes, I can use cleanse before he gets hit by a CC that would interrupt mosh, where Anduin cannot do that. So a basic cleanse can still be really, really cool. In that it allows for some play that other cleanses can't do. It's much more aggressive. So that's one benefit. But Rhaegar has lower healing than most other healers, and Rhaegar also has probably less CC than most other healers, as a lot of healers these days have a hard CC, a root or a stun, with like Malfurion and Anduin having roots. Deckard having roots, and Polymorph is really powerful, coming from I mean, I guess a couple people, but technically just Brightwing. I don't know why I'm blanking. I think only one support has officially a Polymorph. There's some that have like things that interact kind of similarly to Polymorph, but there's just the one, and so he brings less hard CC, he brings less healing, he brings wave clear and camp clear, and that's about it. So if we go to look at the win rates really quick, because this game's actually a shorter game, if we go to the win rates really quick, and we just sort by win rate, we're going to notice that Rhaegar sits in the lower half of the win rates. And where some of these others are pretty accounted for on why their win rates are lower, Malfurion's pretty difficult. Alex Strauss is pretty difficult. Anna's pretty difficult. Ariel is hard to draft on her own. Deckard's pretty difficult. Um, Morales could use a rework. I brought that one up. And Lily has just gotten back from a rework and she hasn't really been rebalanced yet. So everyone under his win rate is difficult or in need of adjustments. In the case of Morales and Lily, they're in need of adjustments. The rest are just pretty difficult. So, or they just need to be drafted in like specific areas. So for him having this low of a win rate, let's look at who's above him, right? We have Uther, just dominant force, does a lot of burst damage, a lot of carry potential, lower healing, but you can compensate that by drafting a second healer. We have Brightwing, who's received buffs over the course of quite a bit, and a lot of people have been seeing Brightwing played, so they know the optimal way to play Brightwing. A rework allowed both Lucio and Anduin to be very, very powerful, as well as Stukov, after some of his balance changes, is very, very powerful. Whitemane is just picked in a small amount of games, and so she's only really picked in her best games. And Karazim, kind of similar, picked in a lower amount of games, only picked in his best games. Same with Tyrande. But you have Rhaegar, whose win rate is just sitting a little low. And I think the main reason why is that everyone above him has received buffs in one way or another. Where he's only really received a couple changes. He got Grounded Totem, which isn't that good. He got his level 1 changes, which after he got his level 1 changes, he did have a win rate increase by a decent amount. So there's parts of this that are really big, but he just hasn't received any buffs. So there is a question, and I'm pausing here for a second because I do want to talk a little bit about Rhaegar's strategy. And so I want to talk about it as the game's going on. The question becomes, should we buff Rhaegar to be as good as the other supports? Not necessarily as much healing, but where they have more healing, he should have more damage or something. Should we buff him in that sense? Or should we nerf down the other supports to kind of come back to the range of where Rhaegar was? Because Rhaegar for the longest time was a decent win rate hero. In fact, for a very long time, Rhaegar was within the top few win rates. If I was to go back through and sort by, instead of picking like these timelines down here, his win rate will probably jump up. I don't think that's actually as far back as I think it is, but and Hero's Profile might take a second to load that, just because it does take a while to load further back. So we'll come back to that. But his win rate for the longest time was between 51 and about 54%. Without ever receiving a nerf, his win rate dropped down as all these other healers got buffed. I don't know if we want to be buffing all healers, because then we end up with that kind of power creep that we've had in the past, where one hero gets buffed and all the other heroes in that role get buffed to kind of compete with that, and then before you know it, that whole role has been buffed so much that you just run that role in every role. Where healers, when they started getting buffed too much, you just ran double healer. Bruisers, we saw when they got buffed enough, we just ran 3 bruisers. And so you can't power creep one role too much. But if we nerf every healer, you might get a time kind of like the Support Apocalypse where people are running no healer comps for a little bit. And so we want kind of an even between the two. And that's where I almost think that instead of buffing Rhaegar or reworking Rhaegar to compete with all of these new reworked and buffed healers, maybe we just tone down the other healers a little bit. Just to even it up, and then kind of tone up the ones that are sitting real low. Now, I want to show this gameplay for a little bit, because I want to show how you need to play Rhaegar to be competitive with Rhaegar. Rhaegar, I don't think is competitive in the... It sounds like a redundant saying it, but he's not that competitive in the competitive scene. Meaning he's not that viable in competitive scene, because what he brings to the table is easily countered or easily answered. He answers the wave clear and camp clear that your team might not have drafted, which is great for Storm League, but your team will draft correctly in the competitive environment, so you don't need to draft him in the competitive environment. That's probably the biggest thing, unless you're going to go with like a Bloodlust comp or something. The second thing that I want to bring up is in Storm League you can be really aggressive with him, where in the competitive scene if you're aggressive with him he's just going to die because people are a little bit faster, they have more coordination, because there's less coordination in this. And keep in mind, while I am on my Smurf account, this Smurf account is near Masters, so everyone in this game is high diamond, low Masters, so it's not like this is a very low rank game. It's still a pretty high rank game, but it's the lack of coordination that makes to where I can make a lot of the plays that I have this game where you normally wouldn't be able to make those plays. And what I do this game is I abuse the high stats that Rhaegar has. Compared to other healers, he has more health, more damage, more mobility, and a decent amount of self-healing than most other healers. And because you have more health, more damage, and more mobility, you can almost play like an assassin while you're healing. It's part of the reason why I've used him in the solo lane so much, is because you can get away with a lot more because of those extra stats. Now, bruisers naturally are going to have more stats than a healer, but you can kind of get away with it on a lot of maps where you don't need to win the lane. But here, you're going to notice I play rather aggressive when we get to these fights, especially in the mid game. I jump in and I stay right there next to my team, and I do a good amount of damage. Every auto attack's 151 damage. You attack faster than once per second, and you have a bite that increases that damage by 75%, allowing you to quickly jump on targets and blow them up. And so instead of trying to continue playing safe and healing, that Tassadar would still be alive right now if I didn't do that, which means that he would still be doing damage right now if I didn't do that, which means that I would need to be healing more. Well, I can only output so much healing, so I have to compensate by killing the enemy damage. And he does that better than most other healers can do that. I think like Uther and Kerazim are probably the only healers that can do this better than him, because Rhaegar actually does more damage than Whitemane would do. So it's surprisingly strong. The other thing that I really like about Rhaegar is just his W. Lightning Shield can be thrown on allies and add a lot of damage. Now, I see that this guy's going to interrupt me for a while, so I just finish him off with a quick bite. Would he have been able to get one more heal off if I didn't bite? Probably not, but I did maybe save my team a little bit of mana, and I gave myself a little bit more time to cap this point. I now need to decide very quickly on what I'm going to go. Bullet is naturally going to lower someone's health enough to where they can get hit by last rites, so I think Ancestral Healing would definitely be viable. But if someone gets pulled away or gorged, then Ancestral is going to be useless, and most of the people that are going to get hooked or gorged are probably going to get hit by the abilities that I was worried about. So I actually decided to go Bloodlust this game, because if anyone gets hooked or gorged, except for maybe the Arthas, Lunara, or Artanis, the Bloodlust could actually really still be very beneficial. And if someone gets gorged, I would have a better shot getting them out if they had extra movement speed than I would if they had that extra heal. But that's also pretty debatable, and I would have better luck like getting to them with Bloodlust. So I decided to go with Bloodlust. I'm pretty sure this game, it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to go this game, and I think there's also a chance I waited until I saw Gorge. Ancestral Healing's range is just really low if you're trying to use it to answer Gorge. So right after the first objective that we win, I immediately go back to getting camps again, where my Artanis that was working on camps in the early game decides to go back to laning. I decide to go back to macro, and this is something that you're going to see me do a lot on a lot of heroes, but it's hard to do on healers, is go back to just macro after everything, and I always just go back to macro. I didn't want to stay in tower range too long, so I waited until I had my W, and I was in a better position. I do end up picking Bloodlust, and I do have my cleanse. Now, I can try to pre-cleanse a hook, but odds are pretty low that I can do that. So right here, I just go to clear this up. These guys actually do a lot of damage, so I move around a little bit, but I don't move around too much because I still want my W to clear them up quickly. You can see how much damage they do. They do quite a bit. We take this next objective primarily because my team is pushing top. We have one person dealing with bot, and I just had pushed mid and forced them to react to mid. So we basically were able to have a higher number of heroes top than the enemy team, because I forced them to have one down here, and we have one down here. And I'm able to get the objective because I'm playing a hero that can clear this by myself, And I'm playing a healer that can clear this by myself. And so Rhaegar does bring some value to the team, but I would say his value's best on a couple maps, like maps that have a lot of camps. I would say like Sky Temple or Dragonshire or Garden of Terror. And then also like him on Infernal Shrines because the W build just accidentally wins the objective. But yeah. Oh, that was the other thing too. We were all talking. We talked earlier, and I said if he goes the other ult, we'll have no interrupts other than swap. And so he ended up going Light Bomb this game, and we were like, thank God, because it was just wild. But yeah, this game pretty much shows how wild like Storm League can get. We have a lot of times where our team is just pushing and dying for no reason. The enemy team has a couple areas where they're doing that as well, and I'm just covering soak for my team. I'm covering mid lane, I'm covering bot lane, I'm grabbing camps, and I'm arriving to every objective on time with full health, full mana, and a fountain available. And it's really important for me to do that, because if I wasn't full mana or full health when I went to that objective, I would have died, or I would have had to stop getting it. And so I still do that every single time, right? Full health, full mana, fountain available. I will have less healing than this opposing Anduin, for sure. I'm not even doubting that. But my hope is that we can still get more value out of the game than Anduin's bringing by getting macro. So right here, once I get around my team, I was going to Bloodlust immediately, but I didn't want to Bloodlust while the Arthas is in there. But I just decided if we could kill him before they get back up to their base, it would be great. That extra attack speed, movement speed, and healing allows us to take out 3 people. And again, would we have been able to do that without Bloodlust? Probably not. And my mobility that I was talking about allows me to get away from things that most other healers wouldn't be able to get away from. So, and again, I don't start this yet because I saw how much damage it did last time, and I don't want that to happen when I have less than that amount of health. So there's a lot of little things that I do this game that kind of brings value, and that's part of the reason why I still think Rhaegar is good in Storm League, but he just needs to be picked on the right map. If you're playing Rhaegar on a map that's that requires you to stand and fight for long periods of time, you're going to do less healing than the opposing team. And so you need to play him on the maps that he's best on and in the right situations. Even right here, I mean, a quick W gives shield to Artanis, extra damage to Artanis, and then an Earthbind Totem makes sure that someone like a Greymane can't get away. I haven't done a lot of cleanses this game. I think my goal was basically just to cleanse Light Bomb, and that was it. You could try to pre-cleanse hooks, but it's really hard to do unless your team's like really prepping for it, or unless you're like a lot better than I am, which a lot of people are, but it's just really difficult to do. You need like really good reaction time. So right here, and I'm cleansing the Artanis just so he could get in there and finish off this Malthael, and so that we can go and help out the Arthas. I shield the Arthas, he ends up dying, I drop down a totem so that it tanks a couple shots and we can get away. And then I actually think I use Bloodlust here so we can get away, but I don't remember. Oh no, I do my W. Okay, so I have Bloodlust here so that we can get some damage and healing on him. You see that those kind of bursts of healing just from both my Q and also my my Bloodlust. If I didn't Bloodlust there, I would have died. And if the enemy team was even levels, I would have died as well. But it's just an interesting game to show because it's one of those, and this kind of shows you the power of W build as well. Those extra shields that you get to throw out are really nice, and you don't even need to go full W build. Just Earth Shield when you have healthy targets is enough to keep your team up for a lot longer than they should be up. W builds doesn't lower the cooldown of W unless you take you don't take cleanse, but those extra W's can bring in a lot of damage. We see chunks of damage right there from both his W and my W, and then we get to basically just close out the game if we want to. I decided to just kind of go for camps instead because not all my team's ready to end this game. I do end up using a totem to drop my W on so that we can have 2 W's out. It's something you can do post 16, but it's not really that useful. He uses bullet, I use my W, and I just get out. You're going to notice whenever I'm unsure about the fight, I like to save my Z cooldown as an escape, and it's a pretty good escape. I do end up giving the enemy camp to them, but I was kind of expecting our team, after killing 4 of them, to kind of pressure the enemy camps instead of our own camps, but you can't always expect your team to do the best play, especially in Storm League, so you need to be prepared to adjust around your team rather than get mad at your team. Because it's not their fault. They all have different plans, right? You have your plans going into a game, they have their plans going into a game. And just because your plans are different from their plans doesn't make their plans bad. They might just have a safer plan or a plan that's more aggressive than what you want. Right here, there's times where I'll just Bloodlust immediately. But in this case, I just drop down a totem so that he can't get very far, and then I go join my team that's more likely to lead to kills. I cleanse him and I Bloodlust so we could lead to a kill immediately, and we immediately work on a second target with both of the W's going. And so this aggression that I'm doing is necessary if you want to play Rhaegar right now. Rhaegar's stats, especially his healing, is so much lower than other healers that you need to do this, right? You need to kind of play up this extra aggression and damage that he brings. He brings a good amount of damage. Keep in mind that half of this game I spent doing camps and waves where like the enemy Malthael was fighting. I mean, Malthael was doing a lot of camps as well, but I did as much damage as Malthael did, and I mean that's pretty big. Or if we looked at like the enemy Anduin, I did twice as much siege, and that doesn't even count camps. And I did twice as much experience contributed than the enemy Anduin. And so it allows me. I actually did out heal the enemy Anduin here, but I mean he went an okay build. It's when you go Lightwell, you generally don't take W talents, and Desperate Prayer is fine. When this is level 20 talent, I used to not like it, but as level 7 talent, I actually really like it. So I think his build's fine. I think it's just that we didn't give him a lot of time to team fight, and the team fights were short because we were doing a lot more damage. You can see, like, as far as damage goes, like, our damage, mine's right up there with Malthael. So they were basically down a bruiser, since our bruiser was doing double the damage as Malthael. And I gave them a lot more opportunities because I was slowing the enemies so that we can get up to them. And the enemies were wasting a lot of time trying to kill me. Like this Greymane was spending a lot of time trying to kill me, where I could just kite him around the team fight the entire time with my totems and with my Ghost Wolf, that I was able to go in, get the kills that I wanted, and then I was able to leave and force the enemy Greymane to basically just get kited around in circles. Nothing against the player or anything. Again, these are good players. It's just that if you want to play Rhaegar, you have to kind of play him like a one-trick. You need to utilize everything that he brings to the table, and he's no longer just a hero that you can kind of pick for a little bit of extra damage to compensate for the lack of healing. The healers are so strong these days that you really need to bring more to the table if you want to play him. So that is Rhaegar. The build that I decided to go this game was just full W build. It's probably the easiest build to play, and in the lower ranks, I wouldn't take Cleanse. I would take Blood and Thunder. That way you can get more Ws out. I also really like Totem build. That's the main build that I usually go, taking Totem at 1, Totem at 4, Totem at 16. That way you can drop these huge, slow totems on the enemy team. But there's a lot of times where I'm like, I can't get value out of that. The enemy team I saw had a lot of melee, and I was like, W is going to be pretty strong. And I saw that we had some sticky melee. Arthas is the best example of sticky melee. He gets on a target, and it's hard for that target to get away because he's slowing them more than he's moving. And so if you can give him a W, it's really valuable in an Arthas. I almost always go W build if we have an Arthas on our team. Where I almost always go like Totem build if there's an Arthas on the enemy team, because he has no engage other than to throw a root and walk towards the team. Well, if you root their entire team while he's trying to walk up, then you can counter his engage every time with a 15-second cooldown. And so there's certain heroes that I almost always go Totem build into. Most of the time against Stitches, I go Totem build because if he gorges someone, I just lock him in place with the root. But yeah, there's a lot of different adjustments you can make to Rhaegar. He's got a lot of tools, but he is not the strongest healer in the game right now. So if you are going to play him and you enjoy playing Rhaegar, you need to play him very aggressive. And you need to abuse this high macro capability that he brings to the table. And that's really where Rhaegar's power comes from. In W build, you need to abuse the fact that you send out 2 copies of your W, so you really need to throw your W on a second target whenever you can, and that could be your totem if needed, unless you really need to have that shield on yourself. You always want to try to get value out of the 2 different Ws. Yeah, that's Rhaegar. Hopefully that gives you guys an idea of the playstyle that you need and why Rhaegar is sitting in the spot that he's currently sitting in. Now, I don't know if the thing's ever done loaded, but you can see that just going back even just a couple patches, Rhaegar's win rate was above 50%. And he was above Stukov, he was above Tyrande, and hold on. He was above yeah, he was the fourth highest win rate not just a couple patches ago, and he wasn't changed at all, right? His build wasn't changed at all. He wasn't nerfed at all. And his popularity, so his popularity dropped by 4%, and his win rate dropped, and it has nothing to do with him being nerfed. It's just that the other healers were buffed, and so I'm afraid that if you buff Rhaegar, he might be too strong, and we would be power creeping the other roles. Because if you buff Rhaegar at all, he's going to be one of the stronger bruisers in the game. Just because he's already a kind of an okay bruiser. And so you definitely need to watch out for that. So I think this is going to be something where we, instead of just buffing Rhaegar, we kind of need to maybe potentially drop down some of the other healers that have recently been buffed to kind of compensate for that. But yeah, only a couple patches ago, and even before that, he was sitting at like 54% win rate. It's just been this patch that his win rate dropped below 50%. It's been the first patch in a long time that Rhaegar's win rate has dropped below 50%. And again, the patch didn't affect Rhaegar at all. It affected Stukov, which Rhaegar had a higher win rate than Stukov. More Stukovs, more. I mean, Brightwing's win rate's about the same. Malfurion's is actually higher. It looks like Anduin's the problem child here. Anduin's win rate, and actually Alexstrasza goes up by like 1%. Anduin's jumps up to 51%, and that's what drops the win rate of Rhaegar, the win rate of Stukov, the win rate of Malfurion. Is just the Anduin change. That was from the old ones that I showed you guys. It was literally one hero. So when Anduin got his rework, it literally affected like 4 or 5 other heroes. So if Anduin gets nerfed a little bit, Rhaegar might just bump right back up again. Really interesting though. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out my other videos.